In 2025, researchers ran an experiment where some people got rejected outright, and some people just got ignored. Same setup, same sting going in. The rejected ones felt better within a day. The ignored ones were still stuck a week later, running the same loop with nothing new to run it on. You know the exact shape of that loop, not the study, the loop. The message says delivered, not read, or read with no reply. You do the math on the timestamp without meaning to. 2 hours, then 6. Then it's been a day and you've reread your own sentence 4 times, looking for the version of it that would have made them answer. None of that adds up if you actually think about it. If someone had just told you no, you'd have been upset for an afternoon and moved on with your week. This is worse, and it's lasted longer. Somewhere in your head there's a quiet, insistent math problem, and it will not let you close the tab until it's solved. You check your phone for a reply the way you'd check a stove you're not sure you turned off. It isn't rudeness. It isn't even really about them. Not at first. It's what the blank space is doing to you, mechanically, the longer it sits there, unanswered. Your brain wasn't built to file away an unfinished sentence. It was built to keep working on it, quietly, in the background, whether you wanted to or not. Silence isn't a smaller wound than rejection. By the numbers, it's a slower healing one. Almost 2,000 years ago, a philosopher born into slavery gave the exact instruction for what to do with a blank space like this. Not how to get an answer faster. What to do with your own mind while it waits for one that might never come. So why does nothing hurt more than something? Here's what you're actually doing most nights, without noticing you're doing it. Rereading the old messages, checking the timestamp again, like it might have changed, running the math on how long it's been, then running it again 10 minutes later, as if a different number might show up. That's not insecurity. That's a system doing exactly what it was built to do with incomplete information. Anxiety isn't really a reaction to bad news. It's a reaction to news that hasn't arrived yet. A landmark review in Nature Reviews Neuroscience laid this out plainly. Your brain runs several background processes to prepare for a possible threat, and every one of them needs an ending to shut down. Give it a clear no, and it can close the file. Give it silence, and it keeps the file open indefinitely, quietly burning through your attention while you're trying to do literally anything else. It's the browser tab that never finishes loading. The little wheel just keeps spinning because the page never told your computer it was done. I've called someone twice in one afternoon over a delayed reply and told myself it was just checking in. It wasn't. It was a system that couldn't close a loop, dressed up as casual interest. You're not weak for spiraling over an unanswered text. Your brain is doing math it evolved to do, on a species where being ignored by the group used to mean something closer to danger than to awkwardness. The wiring hasn't caught up to the fact that most silences in your life now are just someone busy or tired or bad at texting back. But your nervous system doesn't know that yet, and it isn't going to take your word for it. It wants evidence. Until it gets some, you're going to keep checking, which would be fine if not knowing were actually the safer bet. It isn't. Picture the version of this everyone tells you to do. Give it time. Don't jump to conclusions. Wait and see. It's good advice. On paper, it assumes waiting is the gentler option, that if you can just hold off long enough, the sting gets smaller instead of bigger. Here's where that assumption falls apart completely. Researchers ran a study where people were hooked up to a machine that could deliver a mild electric shock, and they were given a choice. Get it over with now, at a stronger voltage, or wait a few minutes and take a weaker one later. You'd assume almost everyone waits. Less pain is less pain, and a few minutes cost nothing. Nearly a third of people chose more pain, sooner, just to stop waiting. The brain scans explained why. The waiting period itself lit up regions associated with physical pain, almost as strongly as the shock did. Not fear of the shock. The waiting. Dread on its own functions like an injury the brain is actively sustaining for as long as the uncertainty lasts, which means the advice to just wait and see was never neutral. It has a cost, a real one, paid in real time, whether or not you're consciously aware you're paying it. Researchers gave those participants an even harder version of the choice. A bigger shock now, or a smaller one at some unknown point later. No set delay, just somewhere out there. The dread got worse, not better, the less certain the timing was. It wasn't really about the pain at all. It was about not being able to see the edge of it. This is what's happening every time you leave your phone face down on the table and pick it back up 4 minutes later. You're not being patient. You're doing the exact thing those participants were doing in the scanner, quietly negotiating with a discomfort that's already active, trying to find some way to make it stop, even if the way you pick doesn't actually help. You refresh the app. You reread the last message one more time, hunting for a tone you missed. You open the conversation, don't type anything, and close it again. None of it produces new information. All of it feels like doing something, because doing nothing, while your body is treating the wait like an open wound, is close to unbearable. There's a term researchers gave to the people who chose more pain just to end the wait faster. Extreme dreaders. Not because they were more afraid of the shock, because they were less able to tolerate the not knowing that came before it. If you've ever sent a follow-up text you immediately regretted just to force some kind of response, you already know what that feels like from the inside. It explains something that never used to make sense to you. Why a clean, blunt rejection can feel almost like relief compared to silence. It's not that rejection doesn't hurt, it's that rejection ends. It gives your nervous system the one thing it's built to want most from a threat, a conclusion. Silence refuses to give you that, so the waiting just keeps billing you, day after day, for a debt that never closes. You're not imagining that the not knowing is the worst part. It measurably is. So the checking, the rereading, the refreshing, that's not weakness. That's your brain doing the exact math it was built to do, the same math a third of a room full of strangers did when they picked more pain over more waiting. The problem was never that you wanted an answer. The problem is what happens next, in the space where the answer should be. Around the year 108, a Roman teacher stood in front of a room of students and compared what's happening in your head right now to a boxing match. His name was Epictetus. He'd spent years of his life enslaved in the household of one of Nero's officials, before eventually earning his freedom and opening a school. He wasn't writing for people with the luxury of theoretical problems. He was writing for people who'd actually had things taken from them, who knew exactly what it felt like to have no control over what happened next, which is what makes his advice on this particular subject land differently than most. He told his students that every sudden, sharp thought that grabs you is like an opponent stepping into the ring. He'd trained under a Stoic teacher who used exactly this kind of imagery. The wrestler, the boxer, someone who's practiced enough that a hit doesn't automatically knock them off balance. And the instinct most people have, the second that opponent shows up, is to react immediately. Panic. Assume the worst. Let the thought throw the first punch and just take it, standing there, no defense at all. His instruction was different. Don't get swept off your feet by how intense the thought feels. Instead, say to it, wait for me a little. Let me see what you are and what you represent. Let me test you. That's it. That's the whole move. Not suppress the thought, not force yourself to feel calm about it. Just refuse to hand it your agreement before you've actually looked at what it's claiming. A thought that says, they're upset with me, isn't automatically true just because it showed up loudly. It's a claim. Claims get tested before they get believed. Then he added the part almost nobody quotes, which is honestly the more useful half. Don't let the thought go on to picture the next scene, because if you do, it will drag you wherever it wants to go. Read that again, because it's exactly the failure mode from a few minutes ago. It was never really the silence that spiraled you. The silence is just a blank space. It was letting your mind write the next line of a conversation that hasn't happened. Then the line after that. Then an entire imagined argument, an entire imagined explanation for why they've gone quiet, built entirely out of nothing and treated as if it were already true. I used to think I was being self-aware, running through every possible version of what they might be thinking. I wasn't testing the impression. I was just letting it finish the story for me, and calling that vigilance instead of what it actually was, which raises the obvious question. How would a man with no access to a lab, no brain scanner, no idea what an amygdala even was, land this precisely on a problem that took modern researchers 2,000 years and a shock machine to prove? Line them up next to each other, and it stops looking like a coincidence. Researchers scanned people's brains while showing them faces. Some faces were angry, obviously, unmistakably angry, aimed right at the viewer. There's no mystery in an angry face. It tells you exactly what's wrong and exactly who's upset about it. Some faces were fearful instead, which sounds like it should register as more alarming, more urgent, more worth your brain's attention. It didn't. The fearful face, the ambiguous one, the one that says something is wrong without telling you what or where it's coming from, lit up the amygdala harder than the clear, direct anger did. That's backward from what you'd predict. A face pointed straight at you with obvious hostility should be the bigger threat. Instead, your brain spends more effort on the face it can't fully read. The researchers had a theory for why. An angry face gives you the danger and the source of the danger in the same glance. A fearful face only gives you half the story. Something is wrong somewhere, and your brain has to go looking for the rest. The clear threat it can process and file away. The vague one it can't stop working on because there's nothing to close the loop with yet. An unanswered message is the social version of that ambiguous face. No content, no clear direction, nothing to point to and say, "There, that's the problem. I can deal with that." Just a blank space your brain keeps returning to, the same way it keeps returning to a fearful expression it can't fully place, hunting for the piece of information that would let it stop. You felt this as a specific kind of tired. Not sad exactly, not angry either. Just worn down by a question that won't resolve itself, that keeps quietly reopening every time you think you've set it aside. It's strange to feel relieved by a brain scan. But there's something to knowing the exhausting part isn't you being dramatic. It's just what an unresolved signal does to any nervous system, whether it's reading a face across a room or a silence across a group chat. You weren't overreacting to nothing. You were reacting correctly to the specific kind of nothing that costs the most. 2,000 years apart, with none of the same tools, a former slave and a research team ended up describing the exact same mechanism. He called it an untested impression, left running, allowed to write its own next scene. They called it an ambiguous signal, unresolved, still occupying the circuitry built for reading threat. Different centuries, different vocabulary, same discovery. It was never the clear threat that cost the most. It was always the one you couldn't finish reading. So if your mind is going to keep working on it either way, whether you want it to or not, the only real choice left is what you feed it while it works. There's a treatment that was built specifically for people whose problem isn't anxiety in general. It's uncertainty specifically, not knowing specifically. Researchers at Concordia University developed a version of it that skips almost everything else and goes straight at that one thing. Because standard anxiety treatment kept helping people with clear problems and doing almost nothing for the people stuck in a fog with no edges. The method is almost embarrassingly simple. Name the catastrophic prediction out loud, not the vague dread, the actual sentence. They're upset with me. I said something wrong. This is over. Say it plainly, the way you'd say it to a friend, instead of letting it stay a formless weight in your chest. Then, without waiting for confirmation, without checking one more time, act anyway. Go to work. Answer the other messages in your life. Live the rest of the day as though the prediction hasn't been proven, because it hasn't. Then, afterward, write down what actually happened, not what you feared, what was actually true once the day was over and the world hadn't ended. Across the studies, that was the part that moved people, not more information, less waiting on it. The prediction, tested against a real day instead of an imagined one, kept turning out smaller than the version running in someone's head. Worry, anxiety, depression scores, all of it dropped with some of the largest effects researchers in this field had recorded, later confirmed in a full trial against people who got no treatment at all. That's the move Epictetus was describing, just without the lab coats and the questionnaires. Name the impression. Test it against something real. Don't let it write the ending before you've actually lived the day it was so sure about. You still have that message sitting there. Read unanswered however many hours or days it's been now. It hasn't changed, but you have. If you actually followed any of this, it's no longer running you. You know what it is now. Not a verdict, not a confirmed rejection, just an untested impression that got treated like a fact for too long. You can let it sit there, unresolved, without handing it the rest of your week. The math problem doesn't need to be solved for you to put it down. If this is the kind of thing you come back for, the channel keeps finding these. Old instructions still working, buried in places nobody bothers to look anymore. There's more where this came from. Somewhere, right now, a version of you is checking a phone that isn't going to answer any faster for the checking. Let this be the one time it doesn't have to.